Well, good morning, Sunday School kids. Pastor Al here. Nice to have you join me again this morning. You know, for the last number of weeks, we've been going through and learning some things out of the Old Testament we might not have known before by watching some videos from the Jesus Storybook Bible. I want to do something a little bit different today because today's a special day in the year of the church. Today is the day we celebrate a thing called Palm Sunday. And there's not a video from the Jesus Storybook Bible on Palm Sunday. So we're going to look at something a little different, but let me just tell you a little bit about Palm Sunday. It was a day in the third year of ministry of Jesus when he was here on earth, where he came into Jerusalem for a great festival. And there were thousands of pilgrims also heading into Jerusalem, and they saw that he was headed in. They heard that he was this great, amazing guy who taught wonderful things, who did miracles, and actually raised somebody from the dead. And they were so excited, they just started having a little bit of a party and a celebration. As he came in, and they waved palm branches around, which for them were a symbol of worship and a symbol of freedom. And said all sorts of wonderful things about Jesus as he made his way down one hill and up another hill and into the city of Jerusalem. It was a great celebration, but there's more to it than that. And I want to show you a little story. It's actually somebody reading a book by a guy whose name is R.C. Sproul. Now, R.C. Sproul was a really incredible teacher. He mostly writes stuff for adults. Been very influential for me, but he wrote a few kids' books. And he wrote one called The Donkey Who Carried a King. And there's not actually a video of it, but I have a really good video of someone reading the book to them. In fact, someone who reads a book in an accent that you may find a little hard to understand, but it's good for us to hear other voices. So I hope you learn a little bit about Palm Sunday today, but I hope you'll listen to the whole story because it tells an even deeper story about the king that this donkey carried and who he did and who he was and why that's important to us today. So I hope you enjoy the Bible story for today, The Donkey Who Carried the King.
The Donkey Who Carried a King by R.C. Sproul, read by the Hovsepian family. One day, a little boy named Riley came home from playing with some other boys in his neighborhood. He was crying as he came into the kitchen to find his mother. She saw him and asked,
"Riley, what's wrong?"
Riley's lip trembled as he tried to wipe away his tears. He was 8 years old and he didn't like to cry, but he couldn't help it. He said,
"Mommy, every time we play games, the other boys pick me last. It hurts so much."
Just then, Riley's father and grandfather walked in. Riley's mother told them,
"Riley has had a hard day. The other boys have been picking him last for their games."
Riley's father put his arm around his son.
"I understand that,"
he said.
"Sometimes I was the last one picked for games when I was your age."
Riley was surprised.
"Really?"
he asked. His father nodded.
"Yes,"
he said.
"I remember how much it hurt when it happened to me."
Riley looked down.
"I think they picked me last because I'm not very good at the games we play,"
he said. His father said,
"Since your grandfather is here, maybe he can help you with this. What do you think, Grandpa? What should Riley do?"
Grandpa thought for a second, then said,
"Riley, have you ever heard about the donkey who carried the king?"
The corners of Riley's mouth tipped up in a smile because he knew he was about to hear another of Grandpa's wonderful stories.
"No, Grandpa,"
he said.
"I've never heard that story, but I'd love to hear it now."
So Grandpa sat down and Riley sat on his knee. Riley didn't feel too old for that.
"You know, Riley,"
Grandpa started,
"several years ago I went to Jerusalem and I saw a funny sight. Lots of people rode on little donkeys. The donkeys in Jerusalem are small compared to the ones here in America. They only grow to be about 3 or 3.5 feet high. The sight of a grown man riding on one of these donkeys made me giggle. The man had to keep his knees bent way up to keep his feet from dragging on the ground. and the little donkey the man was riding just kept going right down the street, bearing the man on his back. I want to tell you about a donkey just like that little donkey I saw in Jerusalem. The donkey in my story had never been picked for anything. He wondered whether he would ever be chosen to do a job. But one day he was picked for a very special task. Many years ago, there was a little donkey named Davy. He lived in a village close to the holy city of Jerusalem. He was too young to work, so he was kept in his hand. He had brothers and sisters, but none of them could play with him because they had jobs to do. Sometimes they carried sacks of olives for their master. Sometimes they worked for people in the community, and some of them even carried grown adults on their backs. David didn't have to carry anyone or anything. All he did every day was stand and wait, eat and sleep. It was boring, and David was often unhappy because it seemed no one wanted him to do anything. The other donkeys who were kept in David's pen told stories about the famous donkeys of history. One had belonged to a man named Balaam. A wicked king asked Balaam to give a prophecy against God's people. As Balaam was riding the donkey to the place where the people of God were camped, an angel blocked the path. The donkey stopped, but Balaam couldn't see the angel. So he got very angry and hit the donkey. Then the Lord God gave the donkey the power to speak. The donkey said,
"What have I done to you that you have to hit me?
Balaam said.
You are not treating me right."
Then God led Balaam to see the angel. The angel said,
"What you are planning to do is wrong."
When Balaam heard that, he decided not to prophesy against the people of God. The donkeys also told a story about old Barnabas, one of the older donkeys who lived with them. Years before, Barnabas had lived in the town of Nazareth. His owner was Joseph, a carpenter. Joseph and his wife Mary, who was about to have a baby, had to go to his hometown of Bethlehem. Mary rode on Barnabas' back. When they arrived in Bethlehem, it was time for Mary's baby to be born. All the inns were full, so they spent the night in a stable where animals were kept. There, Mary had her baby. His name was Jesus. Shepherds came to the stable and worshipped the baby Jesus. He was the Messiah who had come to save his people. Afterward, Barnabas carried Mary and the baby Jesus back to Nazareth. David liked to hear about the famous donkeys and the important things they have done. He wanted to do a big job too, but his master never picked him to do anything. But one day, all that changed. It happened one morning when David was feeling especially down because he had nothing to do and could only eat and sleep. David saw two strangers coming. They spoke quietly to his owner. David tried to hear their conversation. He couldn't make out all their words, but he did hear one of the men say,
"Because the Lord has need of him."
David wondered what they were talking about. David's owner came to the pen and opened the gate. He brought David out and led him to the two men.
"Take this donkey,"
He said.
"His name is Davy. No one has ever ridden him before, but I think he will be able to do this job."
David wondered.
What are they going to have me do? Whatever it is, it seems important to these men.
They led David down the road. Soon he saw a crowd. The two men spoke to the person who seemed to be in charge and called him by his name, Jesus. Some of the people in the group put their coats on David's back. Then, to David's astonishment, Jesus got on his back. It felt strange to have someone sitting on his back, but David was excited too. He started to walk toward Jerusalem carrying Jesus. As they went down the road, a multitude of people came around and put their coats and palm branches on the ground in front of David and Jesus. They began to sing, shout, and wave palms in the air, saying,
Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel.
David was amazed by what he was hearing. He thought,
A king is riding on my back. I can't believe that I have been chosen to carry a king.
David made up his mind to carry the king to the best of his ability. He stepped carefully along the path of coats and palm branches, and he tried hard to carry Jesus smoothly. After David and Jesus came into Jerusalem, Jesus got down and patted David's back. David watched as he entered the temple. David felt very proud of himself.
I carried the king.
He thought.
I must be a very special donkey.
The next day, David's master decided he was ready for regular work. One of the servants put 2 sacks of olives on David's back and set out to deliver them. The sacks were heavy and they scratched David's back. Once or twice he got so tired and miserable that he sat down in the road. But the master's servant tacked on the rope around David's neck and pulled him along. By the time David got home, he was very grumpy.
Why did the master make me carry these olives?
He grumbled to old Barnabas.
I carried the king. I shouldn't have to carry ordinary things.
Barnabas frowned.
We are donkeys,
he said.
It is our job to carry things, whatever the master decides to put on our backs. Every job is important, even carrying sacks of olives, and you should do your best to do it well.
David said.
I don't think I'll ever enjoy this kind of work. I think I'm better at special jobs, like carrying important people.
But David had to carry things every day. Sometimes he carried sacks of olives. Sometimes one of the servants rode him on an errand for his master. David didn't enjoy any of it. He couldn't understand why his master was giving him such ordinary tasks. One morning, one of his master's servants led David to a village on the other side of Jerusalem. As they were returning through the city, David saw a crowd coming down the street towards him. The people seemed to be shouting angrily at someone as they moved along. The servant led David to the side of the road so the crowd could pass. David saw the person the people were shouting at. It was Jesus, the king David had carried into Jerusalem amid such joy only a few days before. But now the people seemed furious at Jesus. David wondered about that. Then David noticed that Jesus was carrying something, a rough, heavy beam of wood. Jesus seemed to be struggling to carry the beam. With a gasp, David saw that Jesus was hurt. His back was covered with cuts and bruises, and his head was bleeding where it was being scratched by a circle of sharp thorns. Suddenly, Jesus fell down. He couldn't carry the beam any further. David wished with all his heart that he could carry the beam for Jesus. He tugged at his rope, but the servant held him back. The soldiers who were with Jesus grabbed a man from the crowd and made him carry the beam. The crowd went on down the street, and the servant led David away. He was confused and sorrowful.
They shouldn't have made Jesus carry that awful beam.
He thought.
He is the king. Why did he have to carry it? Why were they so angry?
When he got home, David found old Barnabas.
I saw something terrible today.
He said.
The king I carried was hurt, and the people made him carry a big wooden beam. Why would they do that?
Barnabas looked at him kindly.
I remember when I carried Jesus and his mother home from Bethlehem.
He said,
His mother and his father knew that he would die to save his people. Someone had told them so. It seems that the prophecy has come true. The king was carrying the beam of the cross on which he was going to be crucified.
Davy was amazed.
So the king was being a servant to others.
He said.
Yes, Davy.
Barnabas said,
It is a terrible thing that he is being treated so badly. But what he did is wonderful.
Davy was quiet for several minutes. At last he said,
If the king was willing to carry that terrible beam, I will not complain about carrying our master's olives. I will follow Jesus' example and be a willful servant. Grandpa looked at Riley and said,
Riley, until that day when Davy was picked to carry Jesus into Jerusalem, he had never been given anything to do. His master never picked him for ever the easiest task, but the other boys do pick you for your games. So, I would like you to try to be thankful you have a chance to play. Can you do that for me, Riley?
Yes, Grandpa.
Riley said.
You're right. I know I should be thankful that I get to play, even if I'm chosen last.
Good.
Grandpa said with a smile.
Also, do your best to be content with whatever you are asked to do, because every player and every role is important. If you are picked to do something special, don't get proud like Davy. If you are given a job that doesn't seem to be so much fun, do your best at your job anyway. Remember that God the Father chose Jesus for the worst job of all, but he did it willingly to please his Father and to save his people.
Wow, you're right, Grandpa.
Riley said.
I never thought about it that way before.
Grandpa gave Riley a quick hug.
That's my boy.
He said.
But let me tell you the rest of the story, the part that Davy did not understand. Jesus died on the cross that day. When he died, he gave his life to save his people from their sins. In a way, he carried their sin and their guilt. By dying for them, he took the punishment that they deserved for sinning against the holy God, the punishment you and I deserve. He was a king, but he was a servant to his people. And do you know what, Riley? Jesus didn't stay dead. He rose again from the grave 3 days later, and he reigns forever with his Father in heaven. And that's the best news of all.
Riley grinned.
It sure is, Grandpa.
He said.
He is the greatest king of all, and I want to serve him and do whatever he asks me to do, whenever it's a little job or something very important.